My name is Jason, and this is Just Watches. Alright, today we are going to be comparing the Manchester Watchworks 62 Moss to one of Seiko's modern interpretations of the 62 Moss, the SPB213. Now, this won't be a full review of these watches. If you're looking for that, check out my last two videos, which I will link now. So, I know this Manchester Watchworks 62 Moss is no longer available, but there are some alternatives I have heard good things about. If you want to go slightly more expensive, there's the Armida A12, which is still available at $469. And then if you want to go a little less expensive, WR Watches has a number of homages to this watch with great specs that run only $239, and you can even get them on sale. They currently even have a red dial option that I'm eyeing. It looks really cool. So while you can't get the Manchester Watchworks watch in this video, just keep in mind there are alternatives if you want this style of watch without Seiko's huge price tag. Okay, so before we get into the comparison, I just want to remind you, if you're enjoying the content of this channel, I invite you to subscribe. And if you're enjoying the content of this video, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much. Okay, so one other important thing is the price here is quite different. The Seiko runs $1,200 MSRP, and that is about what you'll pay for it. When the Manchester Watchworks watch was available, it cost $350. So remember, the Seiko is over 3 times the price. Okay, so starting with the cases, they're quite similar specs here. It's about 40 millimeters on both. The Seiko is 40.5. The Manchester watch does have a slightly longer lug to lug at 49 versus the Seiko's 47.5. Remember, the Manchester's watches lug to lug are much straighter and have less of a curve down. And then they're both about the same thickness at about 13.5 with those domed sapphire crystals, and they both have 20 millimeter lug width openings. Now, I much prefer the shorter lug to lug and curve down of the Seiko's lugs design. However, this is mostly due to the fact that I have a 6 3/4 inch wrist. If you have a larger wrist, you probably won't notice the 49 millimeter lug to lug as much. As for finishing, it's actually quite close. They both have nice circular brushing on the top of the case, and then a high polished chamfered edge that transitions down to brushing on the sides. I would say the brushing on the Seiko is a touch better on the sides of the case, but not by much. And then they also both have pierced lugs. So the Seiko does come with a bracelet, which is always a plus for me, and you do expect to pay more when you get a watch with a bracelet. The Manchester Watchworks does not come with one, but for a little bit of comparison, the Armida is very similar and is $469. So imagine about $120 more for a bracelet on the Manchester Watchworks watch when you're comparing the two. That being said, I'm not a huge fan of the Seiko's bracelet on this, and I think they cut some corners on it as far as the clasp and the overall integration with the lugs on the case of the watch. So both watches feature screw-down crowns that are very similar, but it's nice to see that the Manchester watch crown here is signed, and while it is a minor detail, I'm sad Seiko didn't sign the crown, especially at this price point. It's a major departure from their older lines. For example, the SARB 033 has a very nicely signed crown. So both watches also feature very similar domed sapphire crystals with air coating. I will say Seiko does excellent air coating. Essentially, the crystal almost looks like it doesn't exist, so I do give the edge to Seiko on this one. As for the bezels, they're both 120 click unidirectional bezels, and it's going to be hard to beat the insert on this Seiko. It's something that needs to be seen in person to appreciate, but it's almost like a lacquer finish, and then it does transform from black to this very vivid blue in the right lighting conditions. However, I'm not a fan of the bezel action on the Seiko and actually prefer the much more ratchety bezel action of the Manchester watch. I will say, however, they both have coin edge style bezels, and the finishing on the Seiko bezel is higher. You can see a mixture of finishes were used. So there is again a slight edge to the Seiko on this one. As for movements, the Manchester watch is using the non-branded Seiko 6R15 here, so the only real difference is that the 6R35 in the Seiko has 20 more hours of power reserve, but they both have the same stated accuracy and both function in a very similar fashion. So the dial and indices on the Seiko are finished to a higher level, and it is noticeable in person when you have them side to side that the details are just finer on the Seiko. However, the hands and indices on the Manchester watch are perfectly fine, and the dial has an equally playful sunburst, albeit in gray rather than this silvery white of the Seiko. The intensity and responsiveness of the Lume is equal, and the Manchester just has more surface area, so it does produce a bit more light, but the Lume is excellent on both of these watches. So with a similar set of specifications, what are you getting for the increased price of the Seiko? Now, you probably notice in most of the categories, I did give the edge to the Seiko. It is a more expensive watch, and there's no questioning that a lot of the details are nicer. However, for me, I don't think it fully justifies 3 times the price of the Manchester watch. Additionally, while I was lucky to get a watch with no QC issues, there are quite a few reports of misaligned hands and movements running very close to the edge of specification with these modern 62 mosses from Seiko. And then of course there's the ever-present specter of Seiko's bezel alignment problems. So is a watch worth the money is always going to be a personal question and relative to your own financial situation and level of comfort spending money on watches. For me, the Seiko sits at an interesting price point near the edge of where I'm comfortable. So for me, it's a very expensive watch and I need the cost to be justified. However, for some collectors, I've heard that this modern 62 Moss is a great affordable alternative to watches like the Black Bay 58, which is over 3 times the price of the Seiko. So when compared in that light, you could argue the Seiko is a good value. Therefore, I can only answer this question for me and then make recommendations to you. You will have to gauge how you feel for yourself, but I still don't think the Seiko is worth the asking price, and you can easily satisfy your desire for this style of watch for much less if you are comfortable buying an Homage. Again, these are lots of personal choices, but I hope this comparison was useful for you. So there you have it. What do you think? Which watch would you choose and why? Leave a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And then if you are liking the content of this channel, I invite you to subscribe. And if you like the contents of this individual video, please give it a thumbs up. That's all for this time. My name is Jason and you have been watching Just Watches.